for joining us tonight. This is the July meeting of Manhattan Community Board 4's ACES committee. We are having this meeting virtually with permission from the governor's office as an ongoing to the pandemic. We have a interesting agenda tonight, and we have made some tweaks to the original order that some folks may have seen. And so the folks from the DOE will be going first, followed by the presentation on sanitation. Then we'll do a quick open session, quick depending on how many people talk. And then we'll do our last agenda item, our planned agenda item on the Recording Academy. And then any old or new business can also be brought up. My name is Kit Tollerson, and along with Alan Oster, I am the co-chair of this committee. We also have some folks who are joining Manhattan Community Board 4, and they got the fuzzy end of the lollipop, so they're stuck with this committee. They're here for the first time, so we would love for each of them to just quickly introduce themselves, name, if you're comfortable sharing, where in our district you live or work. And we'll just keep it at those two in the interest of time. Matt, do you want to go first?
Sure. Hey, Kit. Nice to see everyone this evening. So Matt Green, newly appointed to CB4. Very excited to be a part of this committee. I don't feel like I drew any short sticks on this one, and looking forward to digging into the issues. I live in Hell's Kitchen, and I've been a resident of CB4 for the last 12 years.
Charlie, you want to go next?
Yeah, my name is Charlie Todd. I'm a resident of West 54th Street. I've lived in CB4 for 18 years, have 2 children in public schools, volunteer with Litter Legion, and work in the arts. So lots of relevant interests to this committee, and I'm very excited to be serving on it with all of you.
Awesome. Jesse, I believe we have one more member, new member.
Yeah, Aurora Cruz. I don't believe she's with us yet, so she might be joining a little bit later.
Okay, well, we can surprise her with the you have to introduce yourself thing when she joins. Awesome. Well, let's jump right in because we do have an agenda that could potentially run pretty long. James, are you comfortable getting started, or do you want us to give your colleague another minute or two?
She actually has joined. She's under the phone number 917-880-6973. If you can unmute her. Thanks, Kit.
Jesse, I'm probably going to botch it if I try to explain how to do that. Do you mind just going over?
Yeah, no problem. I'm sorry, you said it's the 973 number, James?
Correct. Thanks, Jesse.
That's a yes?
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't hear you. She should be joining now. There we go.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay. Thank you very much, James.
Thank you.
All right, we'll turn it over to y'all. Usually we hear from presenters, and then the committee has an opportunity to ask questions. And then if anyone from the community wants to ask questions, we open it up to folks as well. So turn the mic over to y'all.
First and foremost, it's wonderful to meet all of you and discuss transportation with all of you. My name is James Sarkis. I'm the Executive Director of Contract Operations. I also have our Chief Fleet Officer, Anusha Anantharaman, with us. And we'd certainly like to hear your concerns and address them as best as we can. Please know that we're always looking to improve student transportation. Obviously, that's our goal. Me, myself, I have a child who has special needs, so this is a subject that is near and dear to my heart and something that is a mission of ours and of mine to improve over time. So I'm interested in hearing your concerns and discussing them with you, as well as hearing some ideas you may have of how we can improve service and what your thoughts are there. So I'll stop there. I've also reviewed with Anusha a list of 5 questions that I believe you guys submitted. Was it 5 or 6? It was 5, I believe. And I'm interested also in discussing those questions with you as well.
Maybe what would make the most sense then is to actually talk through those questions that were shared in advance.
Sure.
We may provoke some follow-up questions.
Sure.
We can do it that way.
Great. So I'll read the question and then follow it with a response that we've drafted here. And then, of course, Anusha and I are open to any follow-up questions. So the first question was, is it possible for DOE to use American Rescue Plan our ARP funds for the following? A, extend bus service to late afternoon, early evening to accommodate after-school programs. B, reduce travel time on buses. C, reduce a student's wait time for bus rides. Am I the only one who hears that echo?
Yeah, I put a noose on mute for now.
So I think all of you know that one of the
Sorry,
most
guys.
challenging.
You can go ahead, Jim.
Thanks. So I think all of you know one of the biggest obstacles we've faced, especially coming out of COVID, has been a shortage in bus driver, or I should say bus company employees. This is due to a lot of factors. One is the pay scale may be lower in some instances than other counterparts, such as the MTA or Uber or Amazon, which are taking a lot of employees away from the industry, as well as a lot of there's just not as many people working as there were before. So certainly in the beginning of the year, we suffered through some instances where, we had unfortunately had to put more kids on routes, or did not have as many routes or the capacity to fulfill as many routes as we would have liked. During the year, we did see that free up a little bit. Some of that was alleviated. Bus companies are doing better at providing incentives, such as paying for training, such as providing bonuses to their employees that help bring on additional drivers. So we did see improvement in that particular area. That said, we're not exactly sure how this is going to, line up for this next coming school year. We're optimistic that we'll have better capacity. With any business, I will say this though, it's that, well, we may have to make difficult decisions at some point where certain students or certain groups of students may not have as much access to transportation as others, in the interest of serving those kids that have the greatest need, of course. And that's something that we're going to be assessing as we move along here. But at present, we're also looking to, explore additional flexibilities in transportation, whether that be ride share options or some things of that nature that can perhaps help alleviate the need for so many bus drivers and attendants. Currently, we have 8,500 buses on the road each day during a typical school year. 5,500 of those are special education. About 3,000 of those are general education. So as I stated, we think we're seeing improvement in terms of being able to build additional capacity, especially in terms of reducing travel time and reducing a student's wait time to receive a bus route. But it's still, touch and go in terms of really addressing the employee shortage gap that's very real and that exists in our business as well as many others, unfortunately. Do you guys have any follow-up questions to that?
I think if you're able to go through all 5 questions, folks will have a sense of where they want to really zoom in for the follow-up.
Sure, I can do that. Number 2, why doesn't the DOE own their own buses? Has there been any internal or external study done as to DOE operating its own buses? So this is a very interesting topic. In September 2020, the city actually filed for incorporation to establish a private not-for-profit company to oversee school bus inventory and employees. It's called New York City School Umbrella Services. NICE Bus is what we call it. NICE Bus has since entered into an agreement with the DOE and actually acquired one of the largest bus vendors that was operating on behalf of the DOE. You may have heard of them. Their name previously was Reliant Transportation. They no longer exist. So NiceBus has acquired all of Reliant Transportation's employees, as well as their inventory. NiceBus is managed by a not-for-profit that is governed by a board similar to yours, I imagine, that is filled with DOE employees. So that gives us a certain amount of insight as well as control over that particular operation. As of November 1st, 2021, NiceBus was fully operational. They're operating approximately 800 routes, which is about 10% of the fleet citywide. And our expectation really is that, again, this is fairly new. It's from November 2021, but this is really going to give us some insight into how we can change things, whether it be within our contracts, whether it's expanding the scope of NiceBus, whether it's even moving in another direction in terms of just improving service, making service more efficient, as well as addressing many of the concerns that many of us have about student transportation. So insofar as DOE owning their own buses, this is perhaps not us owning our own buses, but this is certainly a significant step in us having control over a fleet that we can't publicly call our own, but it is operating on our behalf and operating on a not-for-profit basis as well. Number three, we understand that the Chief Operating Officer role at the DOE has been eliminated and the new Deputy Chancellor of Operations role has not yet been filled. What is the timeline for hiring the senior leader to supervise the department that oversees transportation? And why has that role been so difficult to hire so far? So unfortunately, I don't really have knowledge of why the role is hard to fill or why it has taken so much time to fill. We do have a Chief Operating Officer, Emma Vedevra, who has started, I believe, as of July 5th. She's very new. I have not met her yet, but I believe that is going to be the role that she is filling. We haven't really been told that officially yet, but that seems to be the direction that this is going, and that she'll replace the recently departed, I believe that was Lauren Siciliano, if that's who you were referring to when this question was asked. Number four, what short-term solutions has DOE considered to mitigate the bus driver shortage? For example, multiple states have deployed members of their National Guard. While certainly not ideal or sustainable, have these types of creative solutions been explored? So one of the more difficult things, and this actually goes back to the second question, which I thought was a very good one about the DOE having its own fleet. But one of the difficult things that we face here at the DOE is that the vast majority of our fleet, as a matter of fact, all of it before NiceBus was contracted, meaning that the city did not own or have its employees. Most jurisdictions operate their own bus service, or at least have a significant portion of bus service provided by their employees, whether that's school district employees, which is mostly the case, or state employees. Most of the time, the government has some level of control and ways to improve, I guess, a circumstance, I would say, by redeploying its resources from one direction to another. We have not been told that we have the jurisdiction to deploy members of other governmental agencies or the National Guard to our contracted bus companies in providing service. Our own, I should stop saying that, but NiceBus, which is the one owned for the not-for-profit, is not currently operating with a driver shortage. And funneling, anything in that direction, even that would be challenging, given that technically that's not DOE-owned property and employees, that's really owned by the not-for-profit. So in this instance, this particular solution is a little bit more difficult than in other jurisdictions where, again, the government has control over how it deploys its resources. Number five, longer term, what is the strategy to make being a bus driver an attractive enough career path? So one of the things that we do constantly is we push our contracted vendors to create additional incentives to make becoming a bus driver an attractive career path. Signing bonuses, paid training and certification, all licensing fees, even increasing pay, for the sake of profit, which to me is a viable option. Many of our vendors, I'm happy to say, offer incentives. It is often very close to free to become a bus driver. But unfortunately, there is still a shortage. But again, we think that's alleviating to a degree. But certainly, our vendors have stepped up in many areas and have pushed incentives. As a matter of fact, if you're driving around one day, you could look at the back of the school bus. You'll, in many circumstances, actually see those incentives listed by many of our companies. So when you're walking around, certainly take a look and see if you notice any of those things. The next question that was here, which was unnumbered, at its regularly scheduled meeting on April 11th, 2022, members of Parents to Improve School Transportation presented to the committee about issues and concerns related to doubled-up bus routes, staffing shortages, and some students experiencing longer rides than before. According to the PIST members, many students are leaving school at 2:30 p.m. prior to the end of the school day to make the bus. For students with individualized education programs, busing transportation issues are also at times preventing them from receiving the special education recovery services they are entitled to. And we want to be very clear when we say this. We are unaware of any instances where students are leaving early to make the bus. And if that is happening, then we need to know about them, and we need examples of that. And we will address those issues immediately. No student should be leaving school prior to the end of the school day to make the bus. That's not something that we accept, and we will certainly rectify that matter immediately. In addition, the reduction of the employee protection provision this was like a long paragraph here. In addition, the reduction of the employee protection provision has had a direct impact on the retention of an experienced and dedicated work staff. The employee protection provision is certainly controversial. I don't have the authority, neither does Anusha, to give our opinion on the employee protection provision. You may know that there is a court injunction regarding EPPs that prevents us from bidding contracts at the moment because their inclusion is questionable from a legal standpoint. So that's unfortunately not something that we're prepared to discuss right now, the existence or non-existence of EPPs and their legality and whether they're beneficial or not. And the last part here, the PIST members were particularly concerned with the effect that the relocation of families in temporary housing has had on those families' students. Often these families are given very short notice to pack before being moved to new housing, which could be in different boroughs. These families, now in unfamiliar surroundings, have reported not having access to bus transportation for several days and even weeks, leading to a significant loss of school days and learning. Because students in temporary housing and other students who rely on bus transportation have to leave at the end of the school day, they are also unable to take advantage of after-school programs. So this is another thing that we've, obviously tried to redirect our resources towards. This is also something that we are going to continue to try to redirect additional resources toward in this coming school year. Everyone in foster care or temporary housing that's requested transportation, we have tried our best to accommodate. If you have any particular examples of students that have not been accommodated with transportation, then please, reach out to us. I can leave you my email after this. Let us know, and we'll look to rectify that immediately. Because again, that also should not be happening. Anusha, I'm going to pause there to see if you have any comments or anything you want to add to these talking points.
I think you covered it all. Thank you.
Sorry for rambling on there.
No, we appreciate the information and that you all are taking the time to answer the questions that we sent your way. We'll turn it over to board members now. If folks have questions that they would like to ask, the way that we do this for the new folks is there's a raise hand button, or there should be at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We will go to people in the order that they raise their hands. And I also see at least one person in the attendees section has raised their hand. So we'll definitely go over to the public after board members have asked all their questions. Josephine, you have your hand up first.
Hi, thanks so much for being here today. Well, I can't imagine that, first of all, with the students in temporary housing, we in CB4, there have been for the past couple of years, quite a few shelters that we've had here. They were all shut down suddenly at the end of November last year, and many school children were unable to get bus routes. So I cannot imagine that Iris Gersten, who is our Students in Temporary Housing Liaison, works at the DOE, has never contacted anyone at your office. But that's all in the past now. So what we're here to do today is to try to figure out how we can help these students in the future. We have 3 shelters, family shelters, that are opening or already opened in CB4, which now means that we may be in the same position again. And it's, as you know, anybody knows, it's a terrible for the students to have to be moved from school to school. And all we want to do is to be able to ensure that if a student is in one of our schools and then suddenly moved somewhere, then they could at least get busing till the end of the year to finish out their school year, because that is so important for a young child to continue on. It's very disruptive to the school community, the child, the family, everyone involved. So I guess my question is, you said something about ride shares. What could that possibly look like? I understand about the shortage of drivers and about the pay, and that's a lot of information, but I guess what we're sort of looking for is how can we, from an advocacy standpoint, what can we really look at that's viable, that we could maybe write a letter about and help these families in case this were to happen again? What should we be looking to do?
I agree with you, Josephine, on all of your points. And I will say at the DOE here, I personally have not heard from the colleague that you mentioned, although if you could repeat his or her name, I'd appreciate it, because I would like to reach out to them after this to fully understand the scope of the situation. But one of the things that I had mentioned before is possibly redirecting resources to the students who need it most. And that might be a very real and difficult decision that we have to make soon. If the driver shortage is not alleviated to the point where all students can be serviced at all times the way that we want them to be. From an advocacy standpoint, I'm not really sure how to answer that. In terms of rideshare, it's certainly something we're exploring, which again, this is kind of one of those alternate means of transportation that we're trying to put together that can hopefully alleviate this particular group, or help alleviate the transportation for this particular group of students. But our goal is to provide transportation, yellow bus transportation, to as many of the students in temporary housing that can't make it from where they live temporarily to their school with a Metro card to the end of the school year. That's our goal. That's what we want to try to do. So if you can let me know who that colleague is, I'd like to connect with them, kind of understand the scope and the group of students that are involved here, and just make sure that we use our resources in a way that can hopefully address that issue in its totality.
Right. Well,
I'm a firm believer, by the way, that yellow bus is the best way for a kid, to go to and from, especially for the special education population, but and especially for long distances as well. So I prefer that to rideshare and things like that, just to give you my honest opinion here. Especially with rideshare, you really want a parent to accompany them depending on the age of the child. But who's the colleague's name that you were mentioning?
Well, it's a she. Her name is Iris Gersten, Gersten, and she is the Students in Temporary Housing Liaison for Schools District 2. I'm sure that there are others in other districts that you can speak to, but she can talk to you specifically about what happened at the end of last year. So yeah, that's a good person to talk to. I had another question I was going to ask you, but it's just slipped my mind.
Josephine, before
Yes.
you go on to the next question, I'm terribly sorry to interrupt you. Gersten?
Yes, Gersten, yes.
Thank you so much. Go ahead.
Okay. How long does it take typically to get a bus route? And you said something about, you're here for kids who, if they can't for some reason get from wherever they're living to the school with using a Metro card. The issue here is that a lot of these students, yes, they could like get to the school using a Metro card, but that's after taking 2 trains, 2 buses. Some of the kids are very young and mothers have multiple kids, so they could not take their child, commute back into the city or wherever through multiple boroughs just to get one child to one school and another child to another school. And so that's what's kind of happening. It's not that the kid a Metro card won't get them there, it's that they actually need the bus to take them there. So I guess I just wanted to clarify that, but then also ask you how long does it typically take for a student to get a bus route? Like if, let's just say a family was just moved like tomorrow, and all of a sudden they're moved, 2 hours away by subway/bus. So then how long should it reasonably take for that child to get a bus route?
So the answer to that question is it depends, like many things. So, and I'm going to kind of go into the weeds here about our process at OPT and how we distribute bus routes. And I apologize, this is going to be really, really boring.
No, this is very helpful, actually. This is what we need to hear, how it actually works.
So at the beginning of the year, we receive all of our student data from schools, and we route. At the beginning of the year, we create bus routes, approximately, say, somewhere between 8,000 and 9,000 bus routes for about 150,000 students. And we have something called a pick of routes. And this is where all our contracted vendors come and select routes from the group of routes that have been created, and they are required to service those routes at the start of the school year. The place where we run into the most issue in terms of vendors accepting and picking routes are routes crossing boroughs. So we have routes that do some crazy things. We have routes that go from Staten Island to Nassau County, Westchester County. I mean, they're going all over the place in many of these instances, and they are extremely, extremely long. So in some of those instances, vendors are hesitant to accept routes of those varieties. So you have routes that are going between boroughs, between counties. Then you have routes that are that stay within a particular borough or within a district. And those usually are much easier to service. So long story short, generally speaking, at the beginning of the year, when we have our pick of routes, we, by and large, until this past year when we had the shortage, we've successfully distributed all of the routes prior to the first day of school. I'm also happy to say that for the summer, where we had 4,000 routes, we were able to successfully distribute every single route to the vendors before the first day of school. The difficult part comes is, as you noted, Josephine, when something changes. So when something changes, our first option really is to place a student on an existing route. So if we have a student that's, say, living in the Rockaways, I'm making this up, and the school is in Manhattan. If we have a route that is already similar, or routes that are similar in that nature, and we can place a student on that route, even though in some instances we may have to extend the time of the route slightly, we will look to accommodate that student's transportation in that way, rather than the more difficult circumstance, which is when we have to create a new route for a student. So creating a new route for a student then requires us to offer it to our vendors, find a vendor who will accept the route, and that becomes a more difficult circumstance, unfortunately, Josephine. But if a route is, again, performing in the geographical areas where that student is being moved, then by and large, we can place the student on that route without much fanfare. And the student should have a bus route, I would say, within a week. But again, if a new route is required, that can take a couple of weeks, unfortunately, to service.
Thank you so much for explaining. Thank you.
No problem. And if you have any follow-up questions, just let me know.
Alan, you're up next.
Thanks. Well, thank you, James. Interesting. A couple things. One of the things I believe came up at our last meeting with the parents was the inability to communicate issues, parents getting their kids to a particular location, maybe running a little bit late, communicating with the bus driver. How does a parent let the driver know that, could you wait 2 minutes? I'm running 5 minutes late. How, it seems that the bus, from what I remember hearing, the bus drivers don't wait all that long at the bus stop for a student. So could you explain how parents might be able to, or how they are able to communicate that situation to the driver?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Alan. That's a very good question. So every parent should receive, along with the bus route, the company that is servicing that particular bus route. And each company is required to staff their call centers with employees that can help parents in these particular instances. So if there is an instance where a kid is coming out, a couple of minutes late every day, and they need their pickup time adjusted, I would certainly recommend to the parent first that they contact the bus company to help alleviate that situation. If it's ongoing, they should certainly call into the OPT call center and bring us that issue. Because while we have pickup times, nobody should be doing a drive-by, and if there's no kid outside, zooming by someone's house. That's not acceptable. You're supposed to stop and wait, for a student to come out. And no one should expect that everyone is just sitting there waiting at a particular point in time. So certainly if we have that issue, please, encourage the parent to call the bus company first. Say, hey, listen, my kid takes a little while to get out. I need a couple more minutes. They should be able to readily accommodate that. But if the bus company certainly provides you with any type of resistance, please call into our call center and we'll address the issue.
Well, what if it's just that particular day? How does the parent get a hold of the bus driver if they are running late and they would have no other way to get the child to the school, and they have to get to work? And does the bus driver have a cell phone? From what I understand, bus drivers used to have cell phones at one point that they could be called on, or
you can that's a very difficult circumstance that you're bringing up. You can most certainly, again, attempt to call the bus company. The bus company can get in touch with a driver and let a driver know, hey, this student is running a couple of minutes late. Please make sure you wait for them. But I would strongly encourage, you call the bus driver or you should call the bus company as soon as possible. We don't have at OPT real-time communication with a bus driver, or parents don't have the ability to have real-time communication with a bus driver to say, hey, 2 minutes late, like you do with your Uber app, and I'll be there, shortly. That's certainly something that I hope we would have in the future one day. But right now that's unfortunately not technology that we have access to. But once a parent knows that they may be running a little bit late, most certainly have them contact the bus company immediately, and the sooner the better, that they know they're going to be late. If they call 2 minutes before or a minute before and say they're going to be 10 minutes late, that's a very untenable circumstance, Alan. That's not going to be something we're going to be able to really address.
I just want to add here, James, that the drivers have access to vendors through two-way radios. So the drivers are not under any obligation to give out their cell numbers or their personal mobile numbers to parents. So, but it does happen because over a period of time, many parents are friends with drivers and they exchange numbers, but that's purely a driver's personal decision. But the ideal process would be to call the vendor, then the vendor can inform the driver through the two-way radio and make that happen. So that's a better, more streamlined process.
Thank you. Just if I could take another moment, I'm interested about the NICE bus setup. Are the drivers there being paid a different wage? Are they in a better economic level than the other bus drivers and the other companies? And why was Reliant picked, or did they just give it up for some reason and the nonprofit took it over for the city? I mean, Reliant was I believe was a pretty big operation. So if you can maybe just expound a little bit on how that is. And is this being looked at as maybe going forward, taking over other buses in the same capacity?
Yeah, no, it's certainly plausible. I think that may be one of the future goals if we find that, this particular model is successful and sustainable. So I certainly think in the future that it's possible that Nice Bus acquires additional companies. I don't know that Nice Bus pays more than other companies. They have a collective bargaining agreement with Local 1181, which represents many of the bus drivers in New York City. I do know that their CBA is competitive and commensurate with other bus companies, but I don't know exactly what other bus companies are paying their bus drivers. We don't have the CBA for every single bus company and have the driver pay scale for every company. But I know that Nice Bus pays well and pays at least as much as Reliant was paying their employees. You may remember that Reliant was subsidized by a grant that was given to them by Bill de Blasio that helped bring their wages up to those of their counterparts in some instances. And this goes between, what companies have EPPs and don't have EPPs, and how companies that have EPPs tend to have higher wages than those companies that do not have EPPs. So I do know that Nice Bus pays well. Also, why was Reliant targeted? I don't know exactly why Reliant was targeted, but I do know from a contractual standpoint, and this is again going into the weeds, but Reliant had a significant number of what we call contracted routes, which were routes that if they were acquired by another company, they would still be entitled to. Some companies, the way that our bus contracts are structured, many of them date back to 1979, which some of you may know. And they had a certain number of contracted routes at that particular time in 1979, which, as you can imagine, we had a little bit fewer bus routes at that time. So they had like 5 contracted bus routes in 1979. And then through the years, they were able to obtain additional work through the contractual clauses that were in their contracts. One of them being a concept called restoration. And this concept of restoration, again, I'm going to bore you guys here, is a concept where if you take additional work in a particular year, you are entitled, if you accept it and if the DOE has the demand for it, to keep or retain those routes in the following year. So from a legal standpoint, those additional routes, the additional work obtained, was not something that a not-for-profit or another company could acquire along with the entity itself. Essentially, that additional work would go back into the pot and all companies would be entitled to it. But Reliant is unique in that their contract was relatively new, was from 2013, and they had a significant number, over 800, of contracted routes, which would come over to any company that acquired. So I think that made it particularly attractive to the city, that they knew that this was probably the best way to get the most routes under Nice Bus's control in the shortest amount of time possible.
All right. Thank you, James.
You're very welcome.
I have a couple questions and then we'll turn it over to folks from the public. There's still one hand up over on that side of the Zoom column. My first question is, you've said a couple of times that if the Nice Bus model is more successful, sort of the goal will be to expand that. I'm curious what metrics your team is thinking about using to evaluate the relative efficacy of having a non-for-profit that's governing buses that are not technically DOE owned, but sort of sound like they are operated by the DOE is kind of the arrangement. So if you could just talk a little bit about how you all are looking at what's more or less effective and what will guide you in decision-making about how much that slice of the pie might grow, that would be helpful. And then I would also just be curious to hear more about why New York City is a geography where the district does not own school buses, since you mentioned that that's atypical. And in many other places around the country, including other urban areas, the district owns and operates their buses. What is sort of the blocker from New York City doing that, if there is one?
Sure. Those Those are two excellent questions, Kit. So insofar as how we're going to evaluate Nice Bus, and I think there's many ways to evaluate them, but the two most significant, I think, pieces that we'll be looking at is service and cost. If they are cost efficient and if their service is excellent, I think that that's going to be something that that the city will look as favorable. And I think that will be something that will be sustainable going forward. Obviously, there's a lot of in-betweens there, right? If service is excellent, but cost is slightly high, the city may be willing to tolerate that. I couldn't tell you that for sure. If service is poor and the cost is high, I don't think the city would tolerate such a thing. So it's really very much dependent on how well they perform and how efficient they can be from a cost standpoint. And I think those are going to be two of the driving factors. And there's a lot of layers beneath that, but those are the two overarching driving factors as to whether their expansion will be considered or not. I could not speak to why New York City doesn't operate its own school bus transportation. Again, a lot of these contracts, as I mentioned before, are very old. They are from the late 70s. How and why these companies continue, over the years, and why the city has not, before now really explored the idea of operating its own bus fleet. Maybe they have. I don't know. I've only been around for 40 years, which is, younger than the contracts. But like it's something that certainly I'm happy to see the city exploring it now. And I certainly think the more control we can have over our fleet, that the more, we can certainly improve service and create flexibilities in service that our current contracts don't contain. So again, I think this is something that, over time will perhaps, graduate to something larger, but, to before now, I couldn't tell you exactly why it wasn't considered.
Yeah, that's all super helpful. Just go one level deeper on that first question about how you're evaluating efficacy. What are the things that go into trying to quantify how good or bad service is? I might be able to guess some of them, but be helpful sort of as a layperson to hear what are the different variables that output high quality service, medium quality service, low quality service.
So we could start perhaps from a facility or an inventory standpoint. So we do regular inspections of bus yards and vehicles. Certainly the quality and condition of their vehicles, how they take care of their vehicles, the cleanliness of their vehicles is one aspect of service. Second, kind of related to that would be employee morale, employee satisfaction. That would be another thing that we would consider with service. Third would be things like making sure you show up each day, making sure that you're on time. That would be another component of good service. How is your communication with parents? This is a very big point, as a matter of fact. It's very important that a parent can call a bus company and get a hold of them and be able to do something like Alan said. Hey, the kid's going to be 2 minutes late. Can you hang out for a couple of minutes? So being accessible to parents is another component of high quality service. Those are the ones that jump out in my mind. Anusha, did you have any you wanted to add to that?
Yes, there's another. I think that the schools also have the ability to issue violations should there be a route is a no-show or it's delayed. Besides the fact that we react to parents calling into our customer service department, there's also schools can issue violations and we get the information right away so we can follow up. We have a team that manages vendor communication, that looks into complaints we receive both from schools and parents and hold vendors accountable. We call them right away and ask them for their route sheet and the reason for their delay and no shows. And they're required to, we have a team that assesses all the violations and then makes a decision on liquidated damages as well. So apart from that evaluation, we also run reports. We have a data and reporting unit within OPT that runs regular reports and dashboards for us. We get a running commentary on each vendor and their performance, and the number of routes that went out that morning, and how many of them were on time or not, or how many violations have been issued. Our inspectors are our eyes and ears when it comes to safety of buses. So they give us, apart from the fact that they're out in the yards every morning issuing violations, they also, should there be anything that needs to be flagged, they write us emails right away saying that, this is wrong about this bus, or this is wrong about how anything is being maintained. So we don't, we try to not lose any downtime. We try to react as soon as we can and reach out to the vendor on the basis of feedback from schools, parents, and our inspectors. Thank you.
Super helpful from both of you. I just have one more question, and then we'll go to the public if there are no more from the board. I'm curious if you know and are comfortable sharing, what level of priority does school bus operations get, sort of like historically, but more importantly, like with the new administration? And that question is coming from a place of, having been a teacher, having been an elementary school principal, and now having school-age kids. The main interaction that many parents, caregivers have with their child's school is drop off and pickup, whatever that looks like. In New York City, for many families, that's their experience with the bus. The DOE has been experiencing declining enrollment. It was going down by a fair amount every year for years before the pandemic, and then that trend accelerated pretty dramatically during the pandemic. And so I'm just curious, as the district thinks about retaining students, what is, one of the main experiences that parents have with the district busing sort of fit into priorities?
Okay, that's a very good question. I'm not particularly in the position to kind of grade how it fits into the DOE's priorities, but I can tell you two things. One, the DOE most certainly cares about student transportation and getting all students to and from school safely. And B, for us at OPT, of course, this is our main mission, and it's critically important to us, and it always will be, that kids get to and from school safely. So that's really as much as I can say on that particular topic, that you have our full commitment to improving service and to making service as best as possible. And I do believe the administration as well cares about it. I do.
Thank you. Jesse, could you bring over Christine when you have a chance? She looks like she's the only one who has her hand raised in the attendees section.
Bring her over now.
Thank you, Kate. Very interesting subject. I have a question about the length of the route. What is the average length of a route, from the first pickup to the school, from the last pickup to the school, or whatever you want to say?
I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I'm going to go back to something that I said earlier, is that depending on the characteristics of a route, a student's experience can be very, very different. And, my personal opinion here, Christine, is that an average is really not something that we'd want to use as an accurate representation of what a student's experience might be. It's kind of like, you're buying a car. You could say, well, it costs on average $30,000 to buy a car, but some cars are $100,000 and other cars are $10,000. The average is not necessarily, representative. If a route is crossing boroughs, routes can be very long. Routes can be an hour and a half long. I live out here in Long Island. My son experienced an hour and a half bus route to and from his early intervention care when he was 3 years old. And that's because it was far from home. And that was our choice. We wanted a a certain school, and it was far. Um,
Okay.
so there are, there are unfortunately varying levels of experiences. General education kids who are within district, their routes tend to be shorter. Special education kids who are within district or within borough even tend to be shorter. But a significant amount of kids, and I say this, we have a significant amount of special education kids that cross boroughs for education. And again, I'm just giving my personal opinion. To me, it almost seems smarter in some respects to build more schools or to build out more services that are closer to kids' homes rather than busing them further away. But we do see some, significantly long bus rides, up through, 90 minutes, where a student unfortunately has to go, say, from the Bronx over to Staten Island or something of that nature. And, that can be very difficult for a child. So I'm hesitant, to give an average, on this call.
Okay,
I can get back to you
it.
with an average, but
I got it.
so
And
low.
do you have, I'm totally non-familiar with the operation. So do you have regroup points, or you really go address to address? By regroup points is like, everybody within 5 minutes or 10 minutes from a pickup point. Do you use that as a technique or not?
Depends on the population. So for special education students, it's door-to-door service, meaning we
Right.
pick up our students home and we drop off at the school. For general education service, it's what we call stop-to-school service.
Right.
So we assign a student to a bus stop and they go from the stop to the school.
Okay, and I have two other questions. Do you have, how do you measure the safety records of the driver? Is that something that is part of your review from the DOE, or how do you proceed to do that?
So all of our drivers are screened by the DOE. They have to pass through a background check that is performed by the DOE. And they must, of course, abide by all DMV requirements to keep and obtain their driver's license and their certifications. These are all CDL 19A certified drivers that are busing around students. Anusha, did you want to add some more to kind of how we, screen drivers?
I'm not only interested in screening them, but keeping it on, every year, checking on the tickets they get, speeding ticket, blah, blah, blah.
So we have a dedicated driver certification process. I can share the details with you in a document. So where we have some requisites for driver qualifications, taking them on board, and then for them to maintain their paperwork, be it their license, their medical records. We have random drug testing procedures, and they also go through intense training both in the spring and the fall, and they have to submit their licenses, their certifications after training is completed, and we maintain tabs on that too. So apart from the certification process, as we get violations or complaints, or if there is any misconduct or unprofessional behavior, we take immediate action. So if it's just unprofessional behavior or some kind of a he said, she said between the parent and the driver, there is a reprimand or there is a refresher training offered. But if it's a serious issue, we notify our special commissions for investigations as soon as possible. We send them all the paperwork, and then we take the driver out of service right away.
Okay, thank you. And, I can't help to see, when you see the fleet out there, it looks like those buses are pretty old. What's the average age of the fleet, and how often is it renewed?
Great question, Christine. So all of our contracts call for a maximum vehicle age of 16 years and an overall vehicle average fleet age of 12. So the max is 16 and the average age of the fleet can be no more than 12.
So are you putting in the renewal now of the fleet that people have to buy electric buses?
Some, so some good news here is Nice Bus actually, the city has recently purchased 75 electric buses on Nice Bus's behalf. And those should be arriving in the next 1 to 2 years. There's a significant supply chain shortage, unfortunately, when it comes to these vehicles. The vendors also have committed in the latest rounds of contract agreements to purchasing electric vehicles as well. So you will be seeing more electric vehicles on the road. I will caution that the electric school bus industry is a very evolving thing. In some instances, you will not see the reliability that you see with diesel or gas buses, but we are working, with companies on improving that technology, and we hope to see it expand in the future. That's of course what we all want to see for our planet.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Jesse, it looks like we have one more hand from the public. Can you bring over Kiwi Callahan?
Coming over now.
And we'll try to make this the last question because the folks from the DOE did let us know that they were available from 6:30 to 7:30. So we want to try to be respectful of their time.
Yes, I'll definitely be super fast. My signal dropped out for about a little while. So if this question has already been asked, just let me know and I will go back and read the transcript. But I wanted to circle back on the shortage of drivers. And I'm just curious, what is your, what's being done in terms of outreach to try to find qualified or even unqualified candidates who might be able to be trained? Like, where are you looking for these candidates and how are you trying to find them?
So we covered some aspects of that question, but not all of them. So certainly in terms of the bus companies and the incentives that they're offering to become a bus driver, we are seeing many of our companies offering signing bonuses, paid training and certification, all licensing fees being covered by companies. And you'll see a lot of those characteristics, like I mentioned to the group here, on the back of buses on the road. You'll see those benefits that are being applied. From what I've been told in terms of outreach, there's outreach in a number of ways. Newspapers, electronic publications. I've heard a lot of our companies are using Indeed. A lot of our companies actually go out and this is, I think well known, but perhaps not, but a lot of our bus drivers work at other agencies. So you may see, a lot of FDNY employees because they have CDLs or MTA employees that also work as bus drivers if their schedule allows for that. So there's a variety of outreach that goes on in terms of the companies and how they're trying to find additional drivers to cover the shortage.
That's really good to know. Is there anything that's being done in terms of like developing relationships that could then lead to a pipeline? So like, I don't know, developing a relationship with a partnership with vocational schools or I don't know, any kind of like ROTC program where like they would need a CDL to qualify for a certain like office in the military. And so we can provide that experience and those hours behind the wheel, to those people who need that experience to then qualify for later positions. Like, is there anything like that that could maybe provide like a steady stream of candidates that's being, because I feel like, you post on Indeed and you're just kind of counting on people to like find the job listing and then apply, but like having a pipeline might be more efficient. Is there anything being done on that front?
So in terms of the DOE creating that pipeline, as I mentioned before, most of our workforce is contracted. We are not doing anything like that, but I certainly think that's a really great idea and something we could possibly explore with Nice Bus. If we were to expand it and need additional drivers in that area where we could create something like that. That's something that the DOE actually does with, skilled trades and some other areas, which I think is a very interesting concept and certainly a viable one. So that's a great idea and certainly something we'll keep in mind.
Okay, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, I think we're going to close out the Q&A portion here. Thank you for joining us, folks from OPT. I imagine I speak for everyone when I say the work that you all do is deeply appreciated. keeping kids safe on the way from their home to their school, so they can get an education is just an incredibly important and operationally complex endeavor. So thank you for everything that you do. And we may have another letter with more questions or maybe some suggestions, but thank you for joining us. And hopefully we'll see you again at some point in the future.
Yes, I'd be happy to come on again. Thank you guys for having me. It was a pleasure really meeting and speaking with all of you. You guys have wonderful ideas and we appreciate the work that you do as well. Have a great summer, everyone. Enjoy.
All right. We have another presentation coming up next. Before we move on to the next agenda item, does anyone want to make a motion for any kind of a letter, either, well, does anybody want to make a motion of any kind? Go ahead, Josephine.
Motion, sure. I think that we should write a letter, a follow-up letter. I'm not exactly sure what we should put in it yet, other than the fact that he talked about possibly reallocating dollars, but I'm not sure what specifics we would put in it, but I think that that's something maybe that we can at least do. I think whatever we ask for has to be, you know, something that seems attainable. You know, like buying DOE, having the DOE buy buses, that doesn't seem to me to be very attainable. So something that would help sort of immediately. But he, you know, he did mention some things like offering incentives, you know, for drivers, possibly creating a pipeline. I thought that that was an excellent point. So there are some things that we could put in there, but yeah. Does anyone want to second that?
Maybe we hear a couple more ideas about what could go into it, and then we circle back to the motion point, if that's okay with you, Jesse. Alan, you have your hand raised as well.
Yeah, I think I'd like to encourage both the controller's office to keep an eye on this nice bus operation, see what they think about it, and maybe do some sort of a study at some point about expanding it and owning buses, running an operation, maybe get the controller to step into this a little bit more in terms of long-term goal of, you know, creating an in-house bus system, which probably is going to work much better than the current system. That's my suggestion. Might be a separate letter to the just to the controller, as you know, and maybe some of the things that Josephine has mentioned would be a letter more towards DOE. So that's something we could kind of figure out.
Leslie?
I just want to second Josephine's letter, or motion, I should say. And I think we should, if we are going to write this letter, I think we should add or include our main concerns still, just reiterate the main concerns. I know he came on and obviously it's a very complex, complicated problem, right, and situation, but we should still reiterate what our main concerns or what we're finding in our district are the main concerns or problems. And I think it was, I don't want to say a throwaway line, but he mentioned something very important that I think should be included in our letter that isn't necessarily, well, it relates to the buses, but not really, is that the reason why all these bus routes and the rerouting and the borough to borough is because a lot of these services are not near the children that need them, right? They're spread out, whether that's for special ed, whether that's G&T, whether it's, you know, special literacy, whatever it is, there's not enough of those services. Hence, this is a necessary evil, right? So I would suggest that if whoever's writing the letter, if that can be included somewhere, but I think that's a bigger nut. That's a bigger nut we have to crack, right? But I would just second Josephine's motion.
Anybody else? Otherwise, I have some quick thoughts. So echoing one of the things Josephine said, I think the idea of a pipeline specifically to the nonprofit that is sort of de facto the DOE's way of operating buses is a really interesting idea. Vocational, career and technical, whatever you want to call it, schooling is one of the things that I think people are coming back around to and understanding that it's a way to solve like real gaps in the labor market, but B, a way to give young people a pathway to the middle class. And so I think that is very promising and something that we should call out in the letter. I like the idea of pushing the DOE to provide some transparency around efficacy of their different vendors, including Nice Bus, but also the other folks providing busing services. I think the controller is one way that they could do that, and maybe we could suggest that to Alan's point, whether that's looking specifically at Nice Bus or looking across all the vendors. But I do think it would be healthy to have just a better understanding of how these different providers stack up against each other. Because maybe it creates a case for Nice Bus continuing to operate more and more of the city's school buses, but maybe there are private solutions that are actually more effective. And I don't think, based on what we heard, I feel like I have any sense of what the answer to that question really is. Perhaps if there can be more public reporting, we can get to a place where the operations that are providing higher quality service are the ones that get greater and greater shares of the bus routes. And so Josephine, I'd sort of throw it back to you. A couple of us have added on to what you originally said. Do you want to sort of say back to the whole group what you imagine going into this letter as your motion?
So first, to reiterate what the issues are that went into the first letter, and then to go back to what he was saying about reallocating dollars, whether that's more bonuses. He was saying that showed some help to offer bonuses to pay for the licenses, the training, also creating pipelines by partnering with vocational schools. And then calling for more transparency or, about what's actually happening with busing to see if this is really the way to go, if there's a more effective way of doing this. I think that's a good place to start, and I could start something and then just circulate and see if others have things that they want to add.
As long as Jesse doesn't say that I can't, I'm going to say that Leslie already seconded this motion. Does anyone want to say anything before we move to a vote? I think a motion speaks for itself. All right. All those in favor, either
Aye.
and or say aye. Anyone opposed? Anyone present not eligible? Any abstentions? Terrific. Josephine, I think I heard you say that you were open to writing the first draft and circulating it.
Yes.
Is that we can lean on
Sure.
you to be a writer?
Yes.
Much appreciated.
Just a reminder for Josephine and whoever else writes on the letter that our full board is on the 27th. So the letter would really need to be into our office on the 22nd.
Sure. Okay. Thanks, Jesse.
That's a draft, of course.
Okay.
It would be, perfect.
Jesse, I see someone in the public has raised their hand. Could we bring over Sarah to just ask what she would like to say? We obviously aren't in open session yet, and we have another agenda item, but just curious why she's raising her hand. Hi, Sarah. If you are asking a question, you are still on mute.
Okay, better?
Yep.
Okay. So I was one of the two people who were graciously invited to the April meeting and the conversation that jump-started this. And we want to thank you. We have another member, Lupe couldn't make it, but we have another.
I apologize for what I'm about to do, but I'm actually going to ask you to just hold your comments until the open session, which is
okay,
on our agenda. That is when we open it up to members of the public to sort of talk on the topic of their choice.
Fine.
Thank you. All right. Number 2 on our agenda tonight is the sanitation presentation. Alan, I think you wanted to say something quickly, and then I believe we're turning it over to Christine.
Thank you. So garbage, what do we do with all of it as we wait for the sanitation folks to come by and pick it up? And this is something that Christine and Dave Skolnick co-chaired over the course of several months. Christine will get into the specifics about it, but I think it's an excellent first start in terms of how do we manage storage. Before we get to pickup, we have to put it somewhere. So with that, turn it over to Christine. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan, for this introduction. Hi, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the co-chair of the Transportation Committee, and I was the co-chair of this task force where Alan made a lot of contribution, as well as Katie Savage, that you some of you know. Do you have the document in front of you? I'm just, you want to follow, or do you want to put it on the screen?
I can put it on the screen, Christine.
Yeah, what about that? Why don't you put it on the screen and I can follow the document.
Give me a moment.
Sure. So this effort was 2 years ago. There was an effort by the Land Use Committee to look at how other cities and what were the best practice in doing sanitation planning for residential buildings. And they did a fabulous job of documenting what everybody is doing and how, what are the different strategies that people use for that. And what we started.
Sorry to interrupt you, Christina. Is everybody seeing the recommendations page? Is that what we'll see?
Right now we're on the front page. Yes.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Right. So the working group was convened to follow up on that and to try to narrow down what recommendation we could make for New York City. And the focus was what the buildings should be doing for reducing the number, to reduce the number and the volume of garbage outside of, in front of their building. So we were very narrow in our focus. I'm not trying to resolve everything, but just say, if you are a landlord or if you are an operation, what should you be doing, and what do we recommend the city asks you to do? So we had about 6 months. We consulted with city agencies, Department of Sanitation, Building, City Planning, sanitation experts, the chair of the Bronx and Manhattan Solid Waste Advisory Board, and builders like Brookfield and equipment manufacturers. And we got a lot of very good ideas and advice. And finally, we came down with a recommendation that we are going to, you'll see that later, will tailor to either you are a new development or an existing building, because obviously if you are an existing building, you don't have all the flexibility to change your building. And then we segmented those recommendations between very small building, medium building, and large building. So I'm going to start with telling you what are the major components, and then I'll tell you how we use those components within the different building size. So next page, please. So what are the components of what we are the key recommendations? So the first thing is to compact the waste as well as the paper. And in the case of paper, it's called baling, that create bales of paper. The machines are very inexpensive. They reduce the amount of trash by about 30%. And indeed, the weight should be limited so that the sanitation workers do not have to break their back to bring them in. But that would allow the buildings to better use their trash space inside. And then when they put it out on the sidewalk or anywhere, reduce by 30% the volume of what's out there. And today, the compacting is required for all the buildings except the small one, but clearly it's not enforced. And paper and cardboard baling is not currently required at all, even though the paper and cardboard uses a lot of volume space. So that's the first recommendation. The second one is to use rodent-proof containers. I mean, 60 years ago, the city, and it's funny because it's still in the code, it says you have to use a closed container to put your garbage out. And then somewhere in 1961, there was a big strike, and the containers were overflowing, and a plastic company sent, hundreds of thousands of bags to address the problem. And then it remained like that. And that's the way we got the bags. So what we are suggesting is that we should really go back to having rodent-proof containers put out. And that would really, the containers are not very expensive. They can be compatible with future use of mechanical lifts. And it should really abate tremendously the amount of rats, etc. A waste management plan. The city has published a waste management plan that they ask for the very large building to do, but their waste management plan doesn't have any guidelines. And we feel that that waste management plan should be much more specific and prescriptive, and talk about the design of the room and the entrance and exits, and that it should be inspected by the sanitation department, and it should be applied to smaller buildings started at 100. Another suggestion for new construction would be that they plan for a space for 1 week of waste. Today, the planning of the space inside a building is for 1 pickup. So as soon as you have a delay or anything like that, this doesn't work anymore because people have to pull it out in order to continue to pick up the trash inside. If they had 1 week of waste, you would have a lot more flexibility for selecting which days you are going to pick up the trash and the recyclable. And even for some religious minorities who don't want to put out the trash on Friday, they could wait for the following, pickup. And then when it snows, it would allow for people not to put out the stuff when we know it's not going to be picked up, and wait for a later pickup, which would clean up the sidewalk tremendously. The next proposal is to have a staging area accessible to the street. So the commercial buildings have what is called a loading dock, and they generally use it to stage their garbage, right? And everybody says, well, a loading dock, it's very big and it's not going to be nice with residential building, etc. So we're saying you have to provide an area which is adjacent to the street where you can stage your garbage. It doesn't have to be a loading dock, but it should be really accessible and permeable to the street so you don't put your stuff out for a very large building. And the final recommendation is to place the waste in the curb lane or put it out no earlier than 8 p.m. or put it inside. So essentially we're saying you have multiple options here. You can either put it in the curb lane, and you know that there is a program being started which is called Clean Curbs, where there are aggregate of garbage, or you could put it later on outside on the sidewalk, or you keep it in your staging area. So you have multiple places, but essentially we're saying during your 4 to 8 commuting time where you have a lot of people on the sidewalk, don't put the garbage on the sidewalk at that time. And that's the ultimate recommendation. Now I'm going through how it applies to different buildings. Next page. So for brand new building, new and substantially renovated building, first of all, it's interesting to look at the distribution. The one which have been completed in the last 10 years, the small building less than 10 units, there are only 2% of the unit and 61% of the buildings which are like that, the one which were completed in the last 10 years. The medium buildings, which are 11 to 99, are 11% of unit and 20% of building. And the large building, which is more than 100 units, are 87 of your units and 19% of the buildings. That is, there is a tremendous concentration of units in the large buildings. And this is in CB4, in Community District 4. So for the design requirement, for the small unit, we would add interior contained waste storage for 1 week and buy compacting and paper baling machines. For the medium, we would do the same thing. The paper baling machine should be bought in addition to the compactor they have today, and they should follow a waste management plan with detailed regulation. And then the same thing for the very large unit. Obviously, the content of the waste management plan would be different. Oh, and for the very large unit, we're also asking them to have an interior storage directly accessible to the streets. So that would be part of the design, and that would be enforced by the Department of Building. And from an operational standpoint, they ask the small building to compact and waste and bale, use the overdone-proof containers, and keep the waste on site or in the curb lane, or put out at 8 p.m. or later. And it's pretty much the same thing here, except for the large building where they would keep the waste on site. I mean, we know that it's not viable to have very large building put all their waste on in the curb lane, because they would take over many parking space. So they should really provide an on-site staging place for pickup. Next one, Jesse. Okay, and for existing building, for the small building, we wouldn't ask any new design change, but for operation, we would ask that they use rodent-proof containers, right? For the medium building, we would ask that they buy a paper baling machine in addition to the compactor and the compact waste. And then keep the waste either on site or in the curb lane. And for the large building, same thing, use a paper baling machine and compact the waste and then keep the waste on site or in the curb lane. So that the operational requirement change for smaller, for the existing building would not be too burdensome. And but we think that doing those things would make a big difference on what happened outside. So I'm going to stop now, and would love your comments and questions, etc. And the rest of it is really kind of a description of what the different departments in the city have to do in order to implement those recommendations.
Forgot I was in charge of calling on people and I raised my hand. Matt, you had your hand up first.
Thanks, Kit. Hey, Christine, nice to see you. Really fantastic set of recommendations. I was just curious, part of
reducing our waste is getting folks also just reduce the amount of trash that they're producing. And I'm just wondering if the working group talked about a way to incorporate any type of composting within the operations or in the waste management plan, if that could be
I know it's whether it's just information sharing with maintenance staff in the building with their tenants, but I'm just curious if composting had come up as a way to just reduce our overall waste.
So everybody talked about composting, and we all want composting, and the sanitation department wants composting. So everybody wants composting, and that would be part of the plan, obviously, right? If it was approved, but right now it's suspended. So we really didn't spend the time on how to reduce trash. We spent the time on how to manage it and reduce the impact of the trash more than reducing the trash, because there is a lot of very smart people who are working on reducing the trash, and we didn't feel we were qualified. So it was more of, you know, what do you do in your building, what your operation is changed. But obviously, composting, I think we put it somewhere in a recommendation. I think we put it in the further recommendation.
Got it. Thanks, Christine.
Blake, you're next.
Yeah, thanks, Christine, and really appreciate your work and the committee's work on this report. I thought it was fantastic. You know, I had two questions. One is around the rodent-safe bins. You know, I'm wondering who typically funds those bins. You know, is it the building's cost or the city's cost? And if something that we would recommend to the city is having a way for, particularly with the smaller buildings, for residents to request it, or for them to be kind of put into the buildings by the Department of Health when they do rat inspections as a result of the 311 calls?
So, you know, those bins don't cost much. Like you go online and it's $60. It's really, really very reasonable. When you see the number of buildings which are involved, that would be a huge amount for the city. And they used to have that in 1961. People bought their own garbage. So I think we could suggest, you know, some incentives to buy it, but frankly, it's not a big deal.
Got it. So typically the buildings buy it?
Yes, yes.
Okay. And then the other question was just around the staging area. You know, I was a little unclear about what that looks like in practice, if not a loading dock. Do you have an example of?
I think it's a loading dock with a very different name, you know, and it's not a loading dock because apparently the measurement of the loading dock are insane. I mean, you know, you have to have like 2 floors, and nobody would want to have that. So we didn't want to call it a loading dock, but it may be, you know, like a garage entrance, right? That's pretty much what it is. It's a space where you can walk in, you know, not necessarily that you bring a vehicle in it, but you have all your bins lined up, and you could take your bins and pull them out, or the sanitation department could take the bins and pull them out because it would be flush with the, you know, with the sidewalk, right? So that's a very it was a difficult thing to describe, because we didn't want to say loading. When we said loading dock, everybody said no, that doesn't work.
Thank you.
Charlie, you're up next.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I think the report is great, and thank you, Christine, and everyone who worked on it. The sidewalks are so narrow in Hell's Kitchen that you know, when the trash goes out, sometimes, you know, a lot of buildings put the trash out at 11 a.m. or noon, and you can't get by with a stroller, and people have other accessibility issues. So it's great to see the curb being reimagined and getting, you know, this trash into the, you know, take away a parking space.
One of the recommendation we did after that is to say they have to enforce the put out time, because right now it's not being enforced. It's not being enforced anywhere. The other thing we learned is that 4 o'clock put out time, you know, right now it's 4 o'clock. And apparently it came from the religious Jewish community, who didn't want to put out the garbage after 4 o'clock on Fridays. And in their infinite wisdom, sanitation decided that would be a good idea for the whole city, for every day. And we said, wait a minute, this is something you could really change easily, right? You could say, all right, this is whoever is in those communities that don't want to do it, then they don't do it, you know, and then the other people, they just put it out at 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock. I mean, you know, that would make a huge difference, just that. So that's what we propose.
If nobody else has questions, I do have a couple. I'm not seeing any other hands, so I'll go ahead. Christine, the last three folks who asked questions said that they like the recommendations. I just want to go on record and say I like them more. My first question is, did the group that worked on this consider or discuss requiring, when there's a change in ownership in a smaller building of less than 10 units, having something in that design box that was empty? Anecdotally, the brownstone type building next to the building that I live in just changed ownership, and they, of their own volition, made a bunch of changes in line with the recommendations that you all have set out. But I think that's them trying to think about how do we have more value as units we want to rent, and how do we be a better neighbor? And it's not how everyone's going to operate.
Right. You know, I mean, you have seen the numbers. The numbers of small building is like enormous, right? I mean, this is unbelievable. And they are very small building. We were concerned that there was a lot of affordable apartments in those buildings, and there is not a lot of revenue. And, you know, so I think politically, as well as probably physically, a lot of those buildings, we are working right now on 45th Street for the project of containerization. I mean, you know, and some of those buildings, they come from the below ground and bring stuff up, and there is no space in those buildings. There is no space. So I think we decided that politically as well as practically, saying no change for small building was probably a better way to get things approved than even proposing a small thing. I mean, the thing we propose is go by your sealed containers. That they should do.
Yeah, I hear that. I just also, when I think about the fact that more than 60% of the buildings are this building type, it makes me wonder, maybe it's the next round of recommendations. How do you change as much behavior as possible? I'm going to go to Leslie in a second, but connected to sort of the cost of implementing some of these changes, I'm guessing that many buildings have a situation similar to my building that I'm about to describe, where there's a shared super who works for either a management company or is a contractor, whatever the employment arrangement is. And those folks are often working across buildings. And so the gentleman who handles recycling and trash in our building is taking out the recycling and the trash for our building and maybe double-digit other buildings within a couple block radius. When we talk about shifting to only after 8, that becomes a task that is no longer happening during like normal working hours. I'm just curious if sort of the cost that we passed on to residents, including residents in different financial situations, was also something you all discussed.
Well, for those buildings, I mean, you know that there is a test, a pilot's going on right now, which you all approved 3 years ago, and where CheckPed, my other hat, is working on right now, and it's happening, right? It's happening. So this is really exciting. And that plan would install containers in the roadway and regroup 6 or 7 buildings, right? So that's happening. So in our mind, this plan was kind of complementary to that, and say, okay, maybe you have a whole slew of buildings, they're going to be on the container deal, right? And then especially the existing building, all these small existing buildings are going to be in there. And so instead of pulling out at 8, if you have the containers, you can use the containers. So that's an incentive in a way to get on with the program of the container, right? Because now you say, well, I don't have to deal with the 8 o'clock at night. I'll go with my building, my friends, and we'll put a container on the street. But indeed, that's difficult to make all these decisions because this program are not announced yet. but we know they are in the back of your mind. They should be in the back of your mind for all the small buildings. That's where it will go eventually.
Yeah, that makes good sense. Leslie, you raised your hand.
Thanks, Kit. Christine, fabulous job as usual. I thought I was looking forward to the pneumatic tube recommendation, but I know that I think that's too far in the future.
Yes.
But the one thing that I just had a question on, you might have hit on it and I just missed it, that was slightly concerning. I know one of the options you said was put the trash in the street or like one of those as you called, curbside lane.
Mm-hmm.
Now and then you just touched upon it in your last answer. I was going to mention, is there anything in the letter, the recommendations, is it just thrown on the street or is it in some sort of container or cordoned off area?
No, well, I mean, so when you combine, first of all, if it is, hopefully if it is on the street, it's going to be in the container, right?
Oh, okay. Okay.
Right.
I didn't know if you meant, okay, that's it. That answers it.
Yes.
I thought you meant
Yes.
to throw it in a street lane. I was afraid of bikes going, and running into
No,
it.
no, it would be in the
Okay.
container. It would be in the container. There is no question.
Gotcha. Thank
Right.
you, Christine.
Right.
Alan?
You're on mute.
Sorry. In case folks, after digesting the rest of the proposal, have some suggestions or recommendations, can they still contact or have some input past tonight?
Yeah,
Can they
because
email?
we are going to present it to the Chelsea Land Use and then to the Transportation Committee. And, as we go along, we may add some suggestion, right? I think that's fair.
Yeah.
And pull that together for the September board. And so, yeah, we have time.
Okay, so they can email these suggestions to you or to. All right, cool.
All right.
All right, thank you again.
So what we did is we put at the end like a letter, which would be typically, if, with suggestion from other people, the letter that we would send from the board. And that letter would be to Sanitation and DOT, asking that they consider those things and they meet with us to discuss, And then obviously we're going to send that to Eric Botcher, who has already seen the draft of that and is very interested, and who may look at that and say, okay, well, I want to push, who is going to. We also had a meeting with the council, how do you say, Jesse? The council of the city council.
The director of, the policy folks at the council for sanitation. I mean, the
Right.
committee on sanitation.
Right. So this would be the folks that would look at that and say, either sanitation is going to do it by themselves, or the council sanitation can start to float some bills saying we want you to do this and we want you to do that, and then they resolve it with sanitation the way they typically do. So that will be used in 2 or 3 different ways, hopefully to get to a program, maybe next year. It's interesting that I was talking to Sanitation about the other project, and they have been bouncing around, should we push the pickup to 8 o'clock at night by themselves? So they are really very progressive right now and interested in changing things under their new commissioner, which is really encouraging. So Kit, in fact, what would be great is to have like a consensus of the committee, right, on the plan and on the letter which is attached. And then we can, right, Jesse, that makes sense. We would bring back a consensus.
Yeah, I mean, you're just looking for general support of the plan,
Right.
not a letter from anything from the committee, but yeah, that's basically what you're looking for.
I'll make the motion.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone?
I have a quick point of information on should we also CC the letter? And I don't know, maybe Eric might be opposed to this, or might not. That might to Sandra Nurse, the chair of the Sanitation Committee of the City Council.
Well, no, because Eric is on the committee.
All right,
I mean,
so
I
that's
would
all
like
good.
Eric
Okay.
to bring it to the committee. That's going to be his
baby. Okay.
his baby, right? Yeah.
Just to make sure Jesse doesn't beat me up. Anyone present not eligible? Any abstentions? All right. So if folks have suggestions or any questions that come to you in the middle of the night and you sit straight up in your bed, you can email Christine.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Again, really, really
thank you.
Exciting, thought-provoking report.
Kit, you do have Pamela Wolf's hands up in the attendee section. I don't know if it's about this.
All right.
Do you want to bring her over? Because the next agenda item is open session, so she could also speak then if that's more appropriate.
Sounds good. I'm bringing her over now, and I'll bring over Sarah as well.
And it looks like Michael Lipkowitz is on.
Yep.
He probably wants to speak in the open session as well, I'm guessing. Hi, Pamela. Did you want to speak in the open session? Or did you want to comment on this?
I wanted to comment on that. I was looking forward to an opportunity for the public to have something to say about the sanitation, about Christine's presentation, which was excellent. Thank you, Christine. I should let you see my face, I guess. So yes, I'm a little surprised that there was not more discussion about composting, because it seems to me that it's really an integral and vital part of the overall picture when it comes to getting rid of stuff. My two-person household produces about 10 pounds of nice juicy compost every week. If that, and I'm keeping that out of the stream, the main stream of garbage going out from my building, which is a 58-unit building. If everyone did that, it would so radically lighten the load and reduce the rat attractive component of the regular garbage going out, that it would make a huge difference in not just the weight, but the rodent attractivity of the waste that we put out on the street. I just wanted to make that point. One other point is that for the small and medium buildings, the point that Kit made about the employees, the supers of buildings, generally by 8 o'clock at night, they have already had dinner and they're on their way to bed because they're up very early doing the morning stuff. I think there will be an absolute revolt of the superintendent world if they are required to get out on the street at 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock at night and be putting garbage out.
So let me answer
very
to
costly. So those are my 2 points. Thank you.
But let me answer the first one. So the compost is, I think we are all in agreement, there is a waste management plan. And obviously the compost is going to be part of that. You know, once the compost is in place again, it's very difficult to make recommendation, you know, with the pieces which don't exist in a sense. So, and second, the 8 o'clock, what we are suggesting is that they have multiple options. They can go in a shared container outside, or they can they can keep it inside, or they can put it at 8 o'clock, and 8 o'clock is if they want to put it on the sidewalk. So they have multiple options to choose from. And yes, I agree that if all the super have to go to 8 o'clock, that's not going to fly. Okay, thank you so much. Alan, thank you for all the work you did on that. Very important, and thank you for everybody will send me your suggestion and I will leave the meeting now. Thank you so much, Kit. Bye-bye.
So we are going to move into our open session. This is going to be one of the meetings where we do not meet my goal of ending by 8:30. I can already tell. But folks are going to get their full 2 minutes, and then we have one more presentation to get to. If you have not yet been brought over from attendees to panelists, but you would like to speak for 2 minutes during the open session, please indicate that now by pressing the raise hand button. And we will cycle through everybody until nobody else would like to say anything. Let's start with Michael Lipkowitz, and then Pamela, correct me if I'm wrong, you also wanted to speak during the open session?
I do, thank you.
We'll go to, well, we've heard most recently from you, Pam, so we'll go to Sarah next after Michael, and then we'll go to Pamela, and then anybody else who raises their hand. Michael, you have 2 minutes whenever you want to begin.
Thank you. So I'm an assistant principal. I work at the High School for Environmental Studies. We're on 56th Street between 9th and 10th Avenue. In fiscal year 2018, through the Res Away process, the city allocated $57,000 for a bleacher renovation for our building, but it was held up because of our lease issue, which the community board helped us resolve last year. So we're really grateful for that. So since September, we've been working with Gordian Group and the contractor to try and get this project, which is now over 4 years since we were originally promised the project, still not happening. And it just seems like there's a communication gap, and the contractor and Gordian aren't quite working effectively to get the project off the ground. They're now telling us that because of inflation, the cost has doubled from the original amount that the city gave us in the SCA capital plan from 3 years ago. It's not clear if that money will be provided by the city, if that's something we need to lobby our elected officials for. So there just seems like there's a lot of red tape, and we don't really know how to get this project happening, which is from fiscal year 2018.
Thank you for coming back and giving us that update, Michael, and we'll be in touch and continue to try to help in the ways that we can. Sarah, I'm going to start your 2 minutes whenever you begin.
Hi again. Okay, I'm sorry for breaking protocol earlier. I got misheard and was excited because the parents are, the morale is assisted this week because of how difficult the first week of summer school busing was, and also the lack of communication prior for people trying to figure out, did they have a route, what route was it, what time, et cetera, et cetera. So I would say that, you know, our members and friends who either listened or were informed that this is happening, know people who are going through a lot of the things that the gentleman, you know, kind of said are impossible, but it was refreshing to hear somebody admit to the seriousness of the driver shortage and the connection between EPP and wages. So I won't go into much more, but we are available if, and I've already sent some questions during the thing back to you guys, you know, if there's anything that you're unsure whether it would be accurate for including in the next letter, we're totally available to try to help, you know, and some of us are in community board board members. So thank you very much for your efforts in this behalf. That's all.
Thank you. We appreciate you coming back. And I'm sure this is an issue that we'll continue to talk about. Pamela, you're up. 2 minutes whenever you begin.
Thank you. So this is, I guess everybody knows who I am. I'm Pamela Wolf. I live in Chelsea. I'm a member of CCPA and Block Association, and I'm a public member at CB4 on the Chelsea Land Use Committee. This topic tonight, and this is just information. I'm not asking for anything in particular. This is a heads up. As I think everyone is aware, we have a very serious condition. We call it the Nightmare Alley on 8th Avenue from 20th to 22nd Street. It's been a serious problem in our community for the last at least 3 years, maybe longer. There have been many efforts to address it by various different organizations in the community, and continue to be. Last year, I think there was a survey, there was a petitions circulated that got more than 1,700 signatures on it about specifically this issue. Recent research that has been done has convinced us that we could address this more directly and more specifically if we ask our government to enforce rules and laws that already exist having to do with two specific commercial operations in that area. One is a business called Rainbow Station, and the other is called the Blue Store. Both are adult stores. I think they started as adult bookstores, but they've kind of expanded their area. We are forming a task force to address this. We are preparing a letter which we will have ready to present to this committee at a future moment and to the full board. And I think I've run out of time. That's just to inform you. Also, I think Sally Greenspan, who's the president of CCBA, is present this evening and may want to have something to say as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela. I am not currently seeing any other raised hands from the attendees, but Jesse is raising his hand, and so we'll go ahead.
I'll just say, I look forward to the letter. We look forward to the letter, Pam. Obviously, if there's any Office of Special Enforcement that needs to happen at these locations, we obviously know about the tragedy there at Rainbow Station, and but obviously, if there's anything that's filed with 311 that we can help advocate for with Office of Special Enforcement, please just ping me with that, and we certainly can advocate on that.
Thank you, Jesse.
And Jesse, if you could bring over Sally Greenspan, her hand has gone up in the attendees. We'll give her 2 minutes as well. I think you're still on mute if you're talking, Jesse.
Sally, you have to approve when I ask you to come on over if you want to speak. Or accept. Sorry. I'll try another route. There she is. All right.
2 minutes whenever you begin, Sally.
Yeah, I don't, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, no, I don't need to join. I don't need to say anything, but since Pamela mentioned it, I am here. She stated it very clearly. This is a mushrooming situation. Jesse, I appreciate your comments. We will be writing letters. We will be highlighting the situation even more. And really, as Pamela said, this was a heads up because it's brewing now, especially because of what happened last week. So we want to get as much heads up to the community board as we can, and we'll be moving forward on it. So that's all I need.
Thank you, Sally, and everyone who shared thoughts during the open session. I'm not seeing any other hands. And so we're going to go ahead and close the open session and move on to the last item that we have planned for our agenda tonight, which is the Recording Academy presentation about enhancing the presence and support of live music.
In one moment, I'm just putting everybody back in attendee. Hi, Richard. I'm sorry, it's been a long night. Can you remind me who the other folks are from your team that are in attendees that I need to bring over?
Hi there. Yes, this is a long meeting, so we'll try to make it as brief as we can because we know how we've all been through a lot of amazing information tonight. Lachi is one of our guests on. Did you have Lachi available there?
Yeah.
And also a woman, Esther Crow.
Got her. All right.
Great. So again, thank you for having us. I think that Lachi was going to make a little introduction. Why don't we let Lachi start things off for us? And again, we're going to keep it brief because we know it's been a long meeting today. It's great to see everyone. I'm right next door in Community Board 2. So it's great to see you guys in Community Board 4.
Hello, everyone. Can you see and hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, awesome. This is great. So my name is Lachi, she, her. I'm a Black woman with cornrows. I actually identify as blind. I am part of the Recording Academy. I'm a part of the Recording Academy board here in New York, along with Richard and Esther, and we're really excited to be here today. I did just want to step in and do a quick intro. Richard is going to eventually pull up and share his screen so that we can get through this seamlessly. But I just wanted to really quickly give a brief intro of what the Recording Academy is and does, because we do have ways that we're perceived and people don't really know the entire scope of what the Recording Academy does. So what we do is we advocate for musicians, whether it be songwriters and producers of all of the songs that you hear on the radio, on TV, on movies, on your favorite blown up TikTok thing that you watched recently. Those are all created by an ecology of different creators and people who work behind the scenes to prompt up some of your favorite artists, as well as your favorite artists. A lot of folks only know the Recording Academy for the Grammy Award show that we do every year. However, we do a lot. We delve our hand into education, where we work with student-aged folks, student members, getting them educational programming and also mentorships in the music field and industry. We also have our hand in advocacy, where we advocate on every level, anywhere from speaking to Congress and making aware the rights of musicians and creators, to doing what we're doing here, which would be speaking at the community level to the community board about ways that we can help propel the musicians that actually live in these areas. Those folks that create the music of your favorite artists, they actually live in these areas. And we're strategically working with community boards that have a stark musical presence. And that's one of the reasons we're here. And we're building out this program of working with community boards so that we can get more music back into New York. Richard is going to get more into it because he is just a cavalcade, that's probably not the right word, of knowledge when it comes to music and advocacy and working in the community. But the last thing I wanted to say really quickly is that one thing that we do at the Recording Academy as well that gives us that clout to be able to put on that award show is the charity that we do through Music Cares. We help a lot of musicians that need help by providing support, monetary help, or just a place for them to come and get community benefits and other musicians that they can come to and speak to. So because of the pandemic and because of the halt on live venues and live music, yes, the music ecology has come to a halt, and the musician, the creator, has been one of the hardest hit because of that. And so that's why we're here today, to start talking about ways that we can work at the community level to raise the musician back up. Obviously, New York is, Manhattan specifically, is one of the places that bring that culture and propel it for the entire world. So I just wanted to give that brief hello and say that I'm really excited for the presentation that Richard and I, as well as Esther, have put together. And before I hand it off to Richard, I just want to give him a huge shout out because he is one of he's got a lot of knowledge on this, and we have a few proposals that we want to put forth to you today. And so Richard, I want to go ahead and toss it over to you. If you can share your screen and just walk everybody through some of the things that we want to talk about.
Of course, I will do. Thank you for that nice introduction, Lachi. Also, let me try to share this screen. Just a moment. It's okay. Share screen. Will do. So do you have my screen now? Do you have, no, not the right one?
I can see a slide that says, thank you.
Aha, we want the first one then. So I think if I make this full screen, we can see it better. Just a moment. I'd like to, if we could bring Esther on as well, because I'd like her to jump in at some point in this. As Lachi said, you know, the Recording Academy is really understood as the presenter of the Grammys, but it's a year-long, every year effort for us to advocate to Congress and in every part of our community as we can. Are we sharing that screen now? Is that going well? Is the first screen on?
Yes, it is.
Okay, great, thank you. So I've been a member since I was 18 years old of the Recording Academy. My group is called the Bongos, and we're a pop group, but I immediately got involved with the advocacy side of the Academy, and especially with Music Cares, with the charity. But as Lachi said, during the pandemic, it's been an especially difficult time for all of us music creators. The venues have cut back in bookings, and many have closed. It's just been a hard time all around. This is some of the, this outlines really what Lachi was saying. And you know, the musicians we're talking about are members of our community, certainly Community Board 2, where I live, and a few blocks, 2 blocks to the north here, your Community Board 4 has always been historically a center for music. People expect it from us and also come here for the music. And it's been a shame for me to see empty storefronts, empty venues. These are just a few of the venues in Community Board 4, but this is a very, very small representation because there's so many. I just performed at City Winery on Saturday night, which is a thriving business that luckily we do have some that are thriving and they need to be supported. We have an idea to, this screen just talks about the economic impact of the music industry in Manhattan and how it has been a huge industry for decades. I have a new book, Music and Revolution, Greenwich Village of the 1960s, that just focuses on that decade. It comes out in September, by the way. But throughout every decade, the music industry in New York is something that's been a big part of what draws people to the city and to the communities, and it's a big business as well. We have some proposals. Proposal one is something that I had experienced when I first came to New York. There were affordable housing for musicians in what was called AIR programs, artists in residence. It's disappeared, but I think it's something that could come back in some way in buildings that have the space or buildings that could be suggested to have the space. Artistry in commercial venues, of course, this is something that we at the Grammys could bring special events to smaller venues. We could bring Grammy-related musical events that I think could really enliven the music scene in our neighborhoods. And I really would like Esther to jump in if she's on, because one of the things we are looking at are empty storefronts. And that's something that's being used a lot in visual arts right now. And I know that a lot of landlords of empty storefronts, certainly in the Village, I know for a fact, are given tax breaks for having, if they have no tenants. But I think there could be a give back to the community by allowing, say, for instance, the Recording Academy to bring music into those spaces. And it doesn't have to be, I know that one of the first thoughts that may come up is that there are noise issues or sound restrictions. And yes, there are, but we're not talking necessarily about loud events. It can be all kinds of music. So many of our members in the Recording Academy create music for children, for instance, or acoustic music and elements of jazz that are not particularly loud. But we would love the opportunity to use open spaces, storefronts especially, to present music events like pop-ups. As you can see, are you on, Esther?
Yeah, I am here. Sorry.
Because Esther has some specific And I believe around the Lincoln Center area, were you saying? Is that the area that you have experience with storefronts being used?
Yes. Hi, everybody. My name is Esther Crow. I live on the Upper West Side, and I have a couple of quick personal stories that relate to this. One of which is that I am on a team that curates art for an empty storefront in my own building. We're called Art on the Corner. We modeled ourselves after Art on the Avenue. Maybe some of you have heard of floating sort of pop-up artist exhibits around the city. Greenwich Village, I think, was the most recent one, but they started on Columbus Avenue. And also on the musical storefront idea, a project that is called Musical Storefronts is part of Kaufman Music Center, which is right on 67th Street. And I recently had a call with the executive director. Her name is Kate Sheeran. And I asked her to give me sort of the background on it, how it came about. And she is a member of her own bid, the bid in Lincoln Center. And so through a board meeting, that's how it kind of started. And they had an organization who wanted to already put forth the funds for this. Now I realize like funding is an issue. Most importantly, getting the storefront space. They were able to utilize the space on 62nd and Broadway. But the main point that I want to make for this proposal that we have specifically for the musical storefronts is how it can really rejuvenate the community economically, and also just bringing people together more. You know, art usually does that anyway, but either if we were to do some kind of a partnership with something like Art on the Avenue or people who are already using these spaces for fine art, sort of having a partnership with fine artists and musical artists, or just finding, you know, there's just, as we all know, there's just so many vacant storefronts with nothing in them. So yeah, that's my main pitch. But Kate Sheeran, the musical director of Kaufman Musical Center, she just said that it was just such a wonderful experience for the community, and especially there was some struggling businesses like Bread's Bakery, which was right next door, and they saw a big increase in their numbers, and it was just a really great thing for the community. Not
Thanks,
just
Esther.
the artists themselves, but yeah.
And, you know, when you talk about funding, that's why, you know, there may be some pandemic related funding. The ARP, another one of your presentations earlier in this meeting today mentioned, you know, the ARP provisions, et cetera. So there may be monies if we needed that to build, but we could with the music industry, we're sometimes able to get corporate support also to help us present. You know, I'm thinking of, I shouldn't mention any company names, but I'm thinking of certain music stores that may loan us equipment, just things like that. So we're not really asking for finances from, of course, certainly from the community board, but what we're asking for is the support to allow us to do this type of thing. And knowing that we're going to be meeting with all of the community boards in Manhattan, this is our first meeting. So if our presentation, as you're seeing it develop in front of you, because this is our first time doing it, excuse me, but it's something that we're going to go to all the community boards in Manhattan about. And we're just looking for the support to be able to promote music in our communities. And we'd love to hear questions or thoughts that you have. Anyone that's on board right now in the meeting, if they wanted to ask us what kinds of things we're looking for, or et cetera. I mean, we're here to answer any questions, but we're really just looking for the support and for the understanding that there's a music community that needs that kind of support, or it's not going to continue. You know, rents have gotten so high for music, for all of the, certainly community board 2 and 3 and 4. I mean, all of Manhattan has gotten so expensive for musicians that moved out. We're looking for the general respect and feeling of support from our community. I think that's me personally speaking. So that is what we'd like to say today. Esther, would you like to add anything to that?
I don't think so. I just want to thank everybody for hearing us out. And yeah, I mean, it's really just about building more community and bringing more art, and also obviously helping people, not just the musicians, but again, I really think it can help the neighborhoods with,
absolutely.
At least in my own, I just see so many vacant storefronts. We were only able to bring art to one, which is actually in our building. It's on the ground floor, but the whole neighborhood is, you know, is filled with them. So
thank you. Does anyone have, would you like to ask us anything about maybe what kinds of things specifically we have in mind? Because a lot of it is something, like I said, that we're developing now, but we'd love to hear what your thoughts are on the idea of bringing music into some of these empty spaces. And yes, Tamara. Is it Tamara or Tamara?
My parents debate that. Tammy.
Tammy.
I had a question. Have you connected with the business improvement district? I think you mentioned them, but is that part of your kind of rollout and strategy? So I imagine that would be really helpful in being able to connect with some property owners and the commercial entities. So curious about that. And the other thing was, you mentioned that a lot of the members also do serve as teaching artists. And so have you also either schools or sort of social service providers, cultural nonprofits who sometimes are always looking for teaching artists? I know I am too. I work for a local kind of arts group in the district. So
that's good. I'm a professor at the New School also. I teach music and revolution, Greenwich Village in the 1960s as a class at the New School also. And I plan to this fall semester really bring students into this initiative. Esther, you had comments about the first part of Tammy's question. Were you reacting? She was asking about if we've reached out to.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't, because this is so brand new, but I know that is definitely, I mean, I think we would have to, it would, you know, because that's part of community building. I'm in touch with, you know, the bids in my neighborhood here, and to, you know, for like the Open Streets project, for instance, that's also about bringing music to a community. But yes, and that's also how Kate Sheeran was able to make a lot of connections and meet a lot of people who were interested in discussing the possibility of musical storefronts.
Yeah. And we're going to be in touch with the 8th Street in Community Board 2 for the 8th Street organization, which is just that one street. It has so many empty storefronts right now as well. And there's an organization called Shoshana. Are you familiar with them? Have you heard of that? They're using storefronts. In fact, it's so strange, and I'll just tell you briefly, is that I'm a record producer as well. I'm producing a young band. They're in high school, and the lead singer's mother is the head of that organization. I didn't know this, and I was visiting him, and I noticed the Wi-Fi password was Shoshana, and I said, wow, I've just been noticing those stores literally pop up around town. And he said, oh yeah, that's my mom. And one of the artists that has a shop is living in that house. So I got to connect with them, and I want to try to see if there's a synergy that we could have with visual arts, like Esther was saying, with visual arts and music in those shops too. But you know, the main reason for us meeting with you, so you are aware of that we're trying to do this, and maybe where there is support to be lent, that you could help us, because we need all the support we can get. And it was my suggestion to the Recording Academy as a longtime member that we reach in New York City to the community boards first, then build from there, then go to everything else. Because I really think in New York City, it starts with community boards. And then it goes up the ladder or whatever, or it goes in different ways, but it starts here. So I suggested that we meet with community boards first and see what you suggest, because that's what we're going to do. You know, it has to work for both of us, you know? Does that make sense? So, I mean, maybe we could be in touch with anyone. Tammy, if you have thoughts for us, you know, and anyone who does, we want to do something that really works well with each different neighborhood in the city. And it's going to be different in different neighborhoods. We already know that. It's just each one has its own flavor and style, but we want to bring the right thing to the right place.
Well, thank you, Richard. I'll echo what Tamara mentioned and what Esther brought up is the bids will probably be your best bet in terms of locating spaces. I don't know if the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment is something that might be worth reaching out to.
And I do know them. We haven't on this particular, that's good. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially with all the open street programs that are trying to get rolled out. Some of them might have, some of them are side streets that may or may not have vacancies that you're looking for, but you could probably find several stores in those areas. Researching some of the open streets that are open at this point and that are continuing to go on. But so we certainly support you in every way we can. Once, maybe you start to get a little bit better feel for where you can go, where some of these locations are, we can certainly try to bring the various parties involved. There might be a block association that may or may not be that up on having that sort of thing. We can maybe try to mediate something in that sense. So I think going forward, we certainly do want to stay in touch and you want to stay in touch with us. Let us know what sort of progress you're making in terms of finding the actual spaces and who is involved with them. So maybe in that sense, perhaps we could help out.
Thank you, Alan. That's very helpful and very good suggestions and a nice offer to be in touch because we'd like to be in touch with you for this is, Committee Board 4 is especially musical. And there's
recording studios.
I know.
We were all recording studios. There were a whole West Side. There was, unfortunately, a lot of those venues are no longer available. But
no,
maybe we can find some new spaces for you.
Sony had their big space. Also, yes, I still record in Committee Board 4. There are some studios that have remained. And others like Hit Factory and Record Plant. Those were all the historic recording studios have all closed. It's very sad for the music industry when all of our studios have closed. But yeah, we want to bring it back as much as we can and with a lot of energy and meeting with you and your suggestions are great. Thank you for that.
Thank you. I guess that closes that out.
Anyone else?
Really,
anyone else? Would anyone else like to just really? And
anybody on the attendees? Anybody on the attendees side? Oh. No.
Well, I feel their support, even though they're not saying anything. I still feel. Did you want to say something, Jesse?
You feel the vibe.
I feel the vibe. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
I'll just say, if Alan, if the committee feels this is appropriate, I'm certainly happy to help Richard and his group connect with the bids in our district. We have a few. Obviously, is the Bid Association, which is the overarching organization. That's something we can certainly connect Richard to as well. And if there's anybody else, any other groups that you all think we should connect them to, please send them my way. And as long as I know them, which I hope I do by this point, then I think that would be a good start. We certainly can reach out to the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment as well. I'm sure someone works there, so we'll find somebody there.
That would be great. That really would be great. And again, this is our first meeting, so I feel like making this connection has been a big step for us. So we thank you. We really thank you for letting us speak at your meeting.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
We'll be in touch. I'll follow up with you, Jesse, and thank you, and Alan. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. So I think we've come to the end of this session. If there's anybody who wants to bring up anything for new business or something on old business that we want to bring back up for next meeting, Jesse.
I just want to, thank you. I just want to remind folks, Blake has been working, has been advocating for getting Eric Botcher's office to come and speak to us about specifically his sanitation, initiatives in the district. And so it's been difficult to coordinate. We've had to postpone him a couple times. He's had to postponed a couple of times. I think we are a combined effort to make sure he is able to actually physically. He really does want to be here, so if be physically, virtually, or physically here for the September meeting. I did flag for them that since if they're going to be here for the September meeting, which is in the heart of when we do our budget priorities, that I think education would be also something great for him to be speaking on, since we are always struggling to kind of gather, initiatives and which initiatives we should really back come September and October, and getting more information from his office, as and the added bonus now is that we have someone who really knows what they're talking about in terms of council funding and DOE, which is Matt Green, who's been through a number of cycles on this, so can probably guide us as well in September and October into really how we can focus our energies. So I just wanted to flag that. So that just means us in between now and then, I do think we want to maybe collect, not any kind of organizational sets of meetings, but just talk amongst ourselves and really kind of be able to be ready to kind of talk about what we really want to talk about with them, both education and sanitation wise, and optimize that time with him as much as we can.
Yeah, well, just something that Kit and I have been talking about. We'd certainly like to set up a meeting with the Borough President's office and see what they have in mind. I know last year I sent out a list of what the then Borough President funded, which was an incredible list of budget requests that they completed. And Matt was always helpful over the course of the last couple of years in responding to what the district office hands out. So trying not to duplicate and trying to put our energies into schools that may not be getting the same kind of sunshine in terms of their requests. Maybe we can not bump into the district office and not bump into the Borough President's office. So we're going to try to maybe set something up with the Borough President's office to see what they're allocating, how much they have to allocate. Maybe we can get them to fund some of the projects or some of the requests that that's been on our statement for the last couple of years that just keeps getting bounced over and over and over again. So I think we'll have a lot of work to do, perhaps over the recess, perhaps, and maybe get a jump on things come September.
I definitely second that, and I think it would be great. We could always have another call with Kelly, our superintendent for schools district 2, some of the principals, but really focusing on the high schools, because that's where we've had issues, just sort of keeping relationships with principals, seeing what their needs are. We have so many high schools in CB4 that could use some help. So maybe we try to have a call with the high school superintendent, Jesse, if that's possible. I don't, it's summer, so I know that's going to be hard, but I really want to make a push for some of these schools that are very high needs and could use some support.
Yeah, because if we maybe try to get a jump on it, as you mentioned, maybe before September, because once September rolls around, these folks are tied up. Things are, a madhouse, blah, 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 that whole kind of thing. And then come budget time, we're all sitting around the table and just trying to throw stuff into the statement, and we really haven't done the background or research in terms of where we can really make an impact. And I think I did a fast study of the last 5 years of what response we've gotten from DOE in terms of all the requests that we've made. And I don't even think we broke 30% in terms of what we actually get as funded. And that's over the last 5 years. But maybe I'll send it out if I have a chance to kind of finagle the numbers a little bit more, because it's an interesting. We keep going over this and we keep getting the same. I guess I'm just venting a little bit, but we keep getting the same responses from DOE and we keep asking, well, we don't ask, but we need to do a study. So when is the study going to be done for this particular project? And when is it going to be over? And when are you going to tell us whether or not you're going to do this particular thing? Or they kick it back to the electeds, to the district office or to the borough president's office, because they have the cash. And it just seems that knowing that they have the cash to do it, send this, the principal to the electeds and let them fund it. And I don't know, the DOE goes on its way. But anyway, so I think if folks are available during the summer break to maybe chat somewhat here and there and just toss some ideas about what it is maybe we want to focus on. Is it high schools? Is it a certain part of high schools? Is it strictly nuts and bolts issues, fix this, fix that? Is it more policy issues that we want to see DOE push? I think there's a whole thing that we can maybe look at and get a jump on before September rolls around. So just throwing that out. Perhaps we'll do an email out, see if folks are have some ideas, and maybe try to set up some sort of a call, either end of July, maybe in August sometime, if there's some downtime, try to do something like that on an unofficial basis. No committee meeting, Jason.
Sounds good. I can help with that.
Okay, doke. All righty. And with that, any all good?
Someone just needs to make a motion.
That's
I make a motion.
okay, doke.
To adjourn.
Mara seconds.
To adjourn. Make a motion to adjourn.
To adjourn, yes.
Okay, folks.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you very much. And welcome, Charlie. Welcome, Matt. And Aurora, wherever you are, you're welcome also. We'll see you next
Hi,
time.
everyone.
Good night.